is going on, everybody? Welcome into The Highlight, a business podcast for business people. And as we talked about many times before, we're only interviewing the most serious business owners in America. And obviously that's a joke. And, this guy that I got on today that we're sharing The Highlight with is, we've been laughing a lot already before we've even hit the record button. So I was probably a couple seconds late. But Bill Hampton is joining us today. Bill, welcome to the show, man.
Man, thanks for having me, Chandler. This is great. I've been following you, loving what you're doing, and I'm cheering you on from across TikTok and Instagramville, watching what you're doing.
That's right. I feel the same exact way. We have a lot of network connections, so I'm glad that we're actually finally able to connect and get to know each other a little bit better. I love everything you're putting out on TikTok. I have what is it? Is it Simon Sinek that talks about having a worthy rival or something in the infinite game? I believe that's when he talks about it. And so you're my unofficial worthy rival at this point, where I'm like, man, Bill is ahead of me and I just got to try to keep up. But then you post these crazy videos and I didn't know. We were talking about it a little bit beforehand, and you just posted this again on your own social media with some context from a leadership standpoint. But you're a celebrity. You posted one of the most viral videos that I've ever seen in my life with a guy that's training on a gun range and his gun accidentally goes off. So all right, I'm going to back up a little bit because I'm way too excited to get into that story. But just take a couple seconds and tell everybody who you are outside of being a social media celebrity at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we were talking beforehand. I was born and raised in Michigan. I've lived in Nashville for the last 27 years. I'm not from the South, but I got here as fast as I could. This is as far north as I'm going. And, driving to Nashville in July of 1995, I heard a hillbilly on the radio talking about money, and I was hooked. He was the first person I called when I got to Nashville. I literally pulled the U-Haul into the apartment complex, went upstairs and called Dave Ramsey on the radio and asked him a question. And he invited me out to a little class he taught at the Holiday Inn called Financial Peace University. And he and I became fast friends. I think at that time, we were both hammers and we saw every problem as a nail. And so we connected. He had a fellow hammer that kind of saw the world the way he saw it. And 4 years later, he asked me to come lead his radio division. And after I told him that I didn't know how the signal got from the studio to the car, I didn't understand anything about radio. He let me know that that's why he wanted me, because he needed somebody who wasn't a career radio guy to help him do what he wanted to do. And I spent the next 13 years helping Dave build his company and spent a couple years there as chief marketing officer and as a EVP there, and was involved in all aspects of the business. Left there in 2012 for no other reason than I was ready for a new challenge and didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I like to have a hill to climb, and things were just running too smooth there. It was going good. So, hey, let me go make it really hard again. And so I did, and I've spent the last 10 years now just helping small businesses launch and grow and hopefully get better at what they do.
Yeah, I love that. It's so that's where our sort of networks collide, is that, I worked at Ramsey Solutions on the EntreLeadership brand, which is a business coaching consulting brand too, which I'm sure you were there you were probably there. I don't know. Did you leave right before they started that or right as they were launching that? It was super close.
But before, yeah, I left before that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that came out right after that, but that's how we kind of know each other, or know people that know each other. And that's how we got connected. And I love what you're doing, because I've talked about it on the podcast a lot. My first business was a barbecue restaurant, and I came straight out of the Air Force, and I didn't know, like you said, I didn't know anything about anything. I knew how to make barbecue. I knew how to work with my family, but I didn't know how to run a business. That's a totally new skill set. And I wish I'd have known then what I know now, which is getting somebody like yourself in their corner as a business coach, consultant, somebody that's been up that mountaintop to a certain level specifically. And by the time you left Ramsey Solutions, they had grown. Like you said, it was a massive I mean, essentially it became a
Yeah.
corporation at that point. It was huge. You're talking about
Oh,
having
no
a chief
doubt.
marketing officer and other C-suite people. Like that is no longer a small business. That is a big small business. That's a big one. So it's cool that you've already gone up that mountain and now you're going back down and getting more people. And you are a little bit of a glutton for punishment because you're just getting right back into the weeds with people like me that are in startup Bill and high B marketing. And it's like, hey, help me climb the mountain, Bill. I'm here. I need a guide up the hill. And so that was when you founded Hampton Strategies, right? And so over the last 10 years, I got to know, what's it been like stepping out on your own and now you're running your own thing versus, you were one of the early employees at Ramsey. Like, what's the
Yeah.
difference been for you mostly from switching hats out there?
Well, it's a lot of people will reach out to me and their initial thing is, "Hey, we love what you did with Ramsey, so we'd love for you to come do that for us." Well, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
exactly work that way. I mean, what we did with Ramsey took 13 years, and it was every business is unique. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I like to talk to businesses about is it might work that way. It might work bigger than what Ramsey did, and it might be, but that's going to take some time to understand your business. I don't have this set formula that I'm just going to drop you in my cookie cutter deal. We're going to understand your
Yeah.
business. We're going to understand your audience. Why are they coming to you? What is it about what you provide, the problem that you solve that makes people go, yes, I want more of what you're selling? And then let's figure out how to do more of that. I, I think sometimes we overcomplicate this thing. You had a barbecue business. People liked your barbecue. So let's try to figure out, if I was helping you out, I said, hey, let's try to figure out more ways to get people what they like and
Mm-hmm.
get them talking about it so they're promoting it on your behalf, because that's the most powerful thing. And then wash, rinse, and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Within control, though, within a controlled environment.
Mm-hmm.
Many people get something that works, and then they grow too fast. They borrow money. They go deep into debt, and then they can't keep up. And so I just try to take some of what I learned, but within reason. Because you run a $1 million business a lot different than you run a $50 million business or a $60 million business. But I try to remember what it was like to run that $1 million business, and what are those things we did. You got to keep your eye down the road, but then also
Mm-hmm.
on what's right in front of you.
Yeah. Is there like at that point, is it there's certain strategies that work for the $50 million business and that it's okay that the $1 million business doesn't do them specifically just like that? I mean, maybe there's essence of it. I don't know. I think about that all the time from high beam marketing is at a certain level revenue wise. It's sub $1 million still. Like that's our big goal, is to get to the $1 million mark. And so, but when I think about my time at Ramsey or the Air Force or even the barbecue restaurant, which did get over that $1 million mark, we run the business much differently now versus at all those other experiences I had, because revenue's different. Things I'm capable of doing from a cash flow standpoint are so different. And it kills me sometimes to think, man, I know a better way to be doing this, but I just can't. And I'm trying to be creative. And sometimes it works out that the creative solution ends up being good. But a lot of times I'm like, man, it'd be great to have a full-time content guy on staff. But like for now, it's just me
Right.
and cranking it out as much as I can. So like, how do you
Well,
balance that when you're working
yeah,
with people? Yeah.
that is the number one difference between having money and not having money, or being 50 million or versus being one, is the
Yeah.
people, right? The help that you have.
Yeah.
When you're $1 million business, it might be you and a couple others, but it's you. And you know what? It should be you. It should be you. It's your baby. It's your vision. It's in your heart. You're the one that's driving it. I encourage small business owners to stay in it as long as you can. Learn, struggle
Mhm.
through understanding social media and advertising. And yes, do that. No, you're not going to do it forever. I want you working in your strengths as soon as possible, but there's
Mhm.
value in doing that stuff early on and struggling through it, and taking 5 hours to do something that an expert could have done in 1 minute. But
Yeah.
there's value in that. And I got to tell you, the companies that I find that do that, that went through those struggles and that are really involved in every aspect, they at least have an understanding of it because they did it in those early days. Those are the
Mhm.
ones that I see become more successful as they grow to that $2, $5, $10 million business.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that, well, a couple things. One, I don't remember where I saw this stat, but it's like 5% of businesses in America hit the $1 million mark. And then the
Mm,
SBA came out and said that most businesses fail in the first 5 years anyways. It's some crazy rate in the
yeah,
first 24 months, and then it slows down. And
right.
so there's these two metrics out there for business owners that are listening. If you hit $1 million and you get to 5 years old, statistically, there's a very good chance that you'll actually end up making it. And I love what you're saying there about staying in your business, learning the business. I love the person that I work with that's a generalist from a business owner standpoint that knows enough about every area of their business to be dangerous, because then it's much easier to have a conversation with them about it. When I'm talking from a marketing for High Beam, right? Our best clients are always the ones that have been doing marketing for a long time on their own. They've been scrappy, they've grown it to a certain level, and now they're just ready to bring an expert, or a team of experts in our case, to actually help them go to the next level, right? And the clients that we made mistakes with, honestly, like at the beginning when we started High Beam, like I was taking anybody that would say yes and give us money because I didn't want my
Right.
theories and whatever to
Right.
get in the way of cash flow and experience, right? And I'm sure you've got
Absolutely.
thoughts on that as well. But we had a lot of bad fit clients in the beginning, and the core the thing that they all had in common tended to be their involvement in different aspects of their business. If they delegated things away too quickly, I found that they were much more difficult to work with. So I connect with that a lot. As a service-based business, we see that on the other side. I mean, it's marketing's a little different than leadership strategy stuff that you're doing, but yeah, it's so true. So to piggyback on that, the leadership side of things, right? Like, what do you see? Like, what are the differences between? Well, let's start with this. What's the difference in a leader and a manager? Because I think a lot of people that get into business ownership, maybe they worked for managers and now they're managing, leading their own business. And how do we differentiate between leaders and managers? And should we all be leaders, or should we all be managers, or is it both? Like, where do you end up on that
Mm.
spectrum?
Well, love that. I think there's a big difference between leaders and managers. Um, John Maxwell said, managers count things, leaders work on momentum. And
Mm,
that sounds like I'm putting managers down. I'm not. But a manager's job is to take what the leader wants to do and make sure that the train stays on the tracks, make sure that it runs smoothly, and then show how they did that, and then analyze it and see how they could do it better. But
mm,
the leader works on momentum. The leader is working on the vision. It's the leader's job to cast the vision, to get everybody on board, to point everybody in the right direction, and to take them where you want to go. And then you need managers to come in and run those things smoothly.
mm.
So I think there's a big difference between leaders and managers, and good managers are certainly needed, but it's the leader that focuses on vision and momentum.
Mm. The piece that I really want to drill in here on is the leader angle of casting vision and what vision is. And you can see by all the books behind me that, I read a lot, and a lot of these books talk about leaders needing to have vision. But depending on who you ask on the day of the week, vision can either be what we're going to have for lunch today, or what's the big mountain we're trying to climb 20 years from now. So like, how do you define vision? And then how do you coach business owners for trying to gather their first vision, probably?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so there's a couple aspects to vision. I think when people think about vision, they think about, okay, how big is our company going to be in 5 years, or how big? But I think it starts with, who are we going to be as a company? What is the story that people are going to tell when they talk about us as a company? I coach a leader in a company here locally in Franklin, and we were talking about this last week, and he leads a team of about 7 people. And we were talking about, what personality does his team have? Your vision, to me, as I was talking to him about casting that vision, it starts with, who's our team going to be known as? And I think your team needs to walk with a little swagger and go, this is who we are. Yeah, there's other teams in the company and they have their own personalities, but this is what we do. Um, I love to run. I love fitness. And the other morning it was 5 a.m. My alarm went off, and man, I did not want to get up. I was tired. My bed was warm, and I was just reminded of, hey, this is what I do now. I get up when my alarm goes off and I go work out. And I love that for a team. Like when a situation comes up in the company, or other people or other departments are gossiping, or some bad news came through, casting a vision for your team is your team going, well, that's not what we do. We don't engage in that. That's we have our eyes on the ball, and we have our eyes on what we're accomplishing. Other people can do that, but we don't. So I think your vision starts with who you are as a team, what personality you have, what story do people tell about your team. And as I look back on my time with Ramsey, I feel like that's something that we were able to do. The teams that I led, I feel like we had a personality and we were known for something. And so then once you really focus on being known for something, well, then that carries on to your product, how you treat your customers, and that will ultimately result in growing revenues. But I think it all starts with, what are you known for?
Yeah, it's like, what's the identity of both you as the leader, and then by extension, the company will identify the same way, because we've seen it before, core values and all the things that people put on walls, and then they do the exact opposite. It's like more is caught than taught, right? I have a 5-year-old daughter now, and it doesn't matter how many times I tell her to do something, she's me, and she's just acting just like me all the time, and without the filter of like any sort of age, wisdom, or whatever. It's just, she's just emulating what she's seeing around her. So it's the purest example of a company culture, so to speak, but it's just here in the family. So if you think that your team isn't going to act the exact same way you do, you're crazy. I think about this guy in the Air Force I had. He was one of the best leaders I ever had. He was a former sergeant. He transferred over to be an officer, and he was kind of a hard ass. Like he was hard driving. He was very disciplined in fitness. Like he was a bald guy, so his head was always shaved, always clean shaven. There was, some of us degenerate airmen, we try to push the envelope on the shaving a little bit. Maybe it's a day too late. Oh, yeah. I grow facial hair like a little boy anyways, but I was always trying to push it maybe one day too far. And he would get on us, and he would hold us there, and he would military bearing and all the things that we were told to do. He was the one holding the line. And the reason that I personally respected him as much as I did was that he held himself to a standard above the line, and you never saw him dip below his own standard. And I really respected that. So when you think about leaders you've had or worked with, even in your company now, like give me a story about like who's the best leader you've worked with, and just sort of why you think that.
Well, and I'll say this before I get specifically into your question, is the best story I ever heard about what I'm trying to talk about here on Vision is, I was talking to Dan Cathy one time at Chick-fil-A, and someone asked Dan Cathy in a Q&A session, they were like, well, what do you do when you have, employees come up through the ranks and they don't want to say my pleasure. When someone says thank you, they don't want to say that. And he said, well, you know what? I tell them, they're great people. I wish them the best, but they can't work at Chick-fil-A, because if that's not them, then they're not us. And I loved that. I mean, that is the epitome of what I'm saying. That's manifested is, if you don't want to say that, you're great. Nope. I'm not saying you're a bad person, but that's who we are. So if that's not you, you're not us. And I love that. As far as great leaders that I have worked for in the past, I've got to work for great leaders. And I think defining what a great leader is they're not perfect people, for sure. They certainly have their flaws, but did I become better under their leadership? Did I learn and grow? Did they give me responsibility that allowed me to make mistakes? Not fatal ones. Were they mature enough as leaders to let me crash the car? you know, couldn't be a fatal accident, but I had a few fender benders. Why? Because they created teachable moments. So I think about when I was 24 years old, I worked for a guy who lives here in town named Dwayne Ward. He ran a company called Premier Speakers Bureau. And Dwayne asked me to come lead his speakers bureau. So at 24 years old, I was the vice president of this company. I was the only employee, so it wasn't that big of a title. But and you know what? Within a couple days, at 24 years old, I was talking to Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North on the phone, or I was talking to these big celebrities, booking them for their speaking engagements. Now, how does that make Dwayne a great leader? Because he wasn't trying to do it all himself. He was okay with a 24-year-old kid representing his company, and he would listen in. And then after the call, he'd say, hey, let's talk about that. And he would break it down for me. So I learned a ton in that about you've got to release it. You know what? The worst leaders, what do? They hold everything so tight, and they're such control freaks that no one under them ever gets the opportunity to try and to grow. You know, that Dave did that for me. Dave handed over the reins to me, and I was running probably 30 or 40 million dollars of his business within short order, and making really big decisions, hundreds of thousands of dollars of expenses, and overseeing these P&Ls, probably before I really had earned that right. But he knew that down the road, I was going to have to be able to do that. And, you know, I'm sure you heard it when you were there. You know, you inspect what you expect. And so he inspected what he expected. He laid out what he expected from me. But then he'd circle back and say, let's talk about that. Well, how could you do that better? What could have been done differently there? So great leaders to me get people on their team, coach them up, and then let them do their thing within boundaries. There's got to be certain boundaries. You just can't give them completely free rein. But if the people under you aren't getting better, then you're not doing a very good job of leading.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot to unpack there. The first thing that came to my mind while you were saying all that was, I believe it was Jocko Willink in his book Extreme Ownership, where he talks about leaders' intent. And so if the intent of the team is to take the hill, my job as a leader is not to come in and say, hey, here's every step you have to take on the way up the hill. Because if I mandate that happens, like there's a good chance, in his extreme example is war, because, you know, that's Navy SEAL background, but like guys get hurt, guys get killed. It's a big deal. And so if you're running a barbecue shop or a marketing agency or, you know, a lawn care company, whatever it is, your intent should be, let's use the lawn care example, right? I think about that. Maybe you got a new guy that's running the team, right? And he's handling a job for the first time on his own. The intent of the leader, the owner of the company is, hey, serve the customer well, do a good job, clean up, all the core value things. That's our intent here. And then, you know, maybe they get in there and they're running the mowers, and then a rock kicks up and goes through somebody's window. Well, like nobody planned on that. And you're going to find out pretty quickly what kind of organization that company has. Because if that guy immediately goes to being defensive, if he's blaming you for having rocks in your yard, like whatever is happening there, you're going to see. Or if he's going on the other way of saying, oh, hey, we're so sorry, we're going to get this handled. Like we got a window guy, we're going to call him, blah, blah, blah. And he's just taking ownership of the situation. And then he's calling you as the owner going, hey, just letting you know, this is what happened. This is what we're doing now. Let me know if you want us to keep going forward, or if you got a better option. What do you want to do? There's night and day differences. And I know both of us, everybody listening, has experienced both of those things. And it's very apparent what leaders are actually giving authority and delegating to their team and which ones aren't.
No question at all. And, you know, I think about what you just described there is somebody who's been taught to, you know, bring solutions, not problems. So that guy could have went and called his boss and went, oh man, the rock went through the window. What do we do now? Well, how about you? What do you think we should do? You know, that just happened. What do you think we should do there? And that's what I think a great leader would do is really help their people think about solutions, not just talk about the problems.
Yeah, I love that. So on the other side of the coin, we've heard the good side, and you don't have to get specific details or names, but I got to hear a story. Who's the craziest leader or the craziest leadership story you've ever heard? Or maybe you got in with a client and you were just like, bro, or man, this is wild.
Man. God, I try to get those out of my head. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
That's a better way to live life. I think
honestly,
you just let it go.
I don't know that I've worked for really bad leaders, but I've had clients. I've witnessed really poor leadership, and what comes to mind just in general is, boy, a leader that quickly throws their team under the bus. Throws somebody who works for him under the bus, and doesn't take responsibility for it. That to me is just so unattractive. It's so disappointing. I just can't imagine being somewhere where the owner would be like, oh man, that guy, man, when I say throw the person under the bus, I mean, they blame them for who they are, not as a representative of the company, but as just a person. And I just think that's so bad. Like, I wouldn't even want to work with a company if somebody did that, if that's how they handled a situation to me. The other thing I see in poor leadership is they're really bad communicators. Like, they try to hide things from the team. And I see it a lot where people don't think that they think the team doesn't know what's going on. Like, they don't think the team sees all the dysfunction amongst the team. And it would just be so much easier if the leader would just call everyone together and say, guys, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. We know it's going on, and we're going to fix it. To me, all of a sudden the team goes, great, I'm glad they see it, and I'm glad they're going to do something about it. But I see so many leaders act like it doesn't exist. And your people aren't stupid. They see things. They just want you to treat them like adults and talk about what's going on. And then they want to know that there's a plan to fix it. It doesn't have to be fixed today. So I think communication is probably the biggest weakness I see in poor leaders. Is just bad communication.
Do you have a couple tips, like right off the top of the head, about 2 or 3 things we could all look at to be better communicators next week?
Well, a couple things. If you work I'll say this first one too. If you work for a company, right? So if you're an employee at a company, I heard Andy Stanley say this one time, and I've never forgotten it. And it's one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten. He said, praise publicly leads to leverage privately. And I got that. When he said it, I just got it. And to me, that says, man, when I'm out amongst the team, I'm going to do the best job I can to represent the company and try to have the leader's back for what he's trying to do, even if I don't understand it. Then that earns me the right to be able to go behind closed doors with that leader and go, dude, listen, I got your back out there, but I don't get it. Like, I'm not seeing what you're doing here. Help me. And you have tremendous leverage when you're that guy. But what do a lot of people do today? They badmouth their company. They badmouth their leader in groups, and they join in the gossip, and they just join in with everybody else. And then they wonder why they don't have leverage. You think the leader's not going to find that out? They do. And look, that guy more than likely is trying to do the best job he can. And he just doesn't know. So there's tremendous praise publicly leads to leverage privately. As the leader of the organization, what I said earlier, just look, you can't share everything, right? You don't need to place all the burdens on the team, but be aware enough that when there is obviously something that is just not going right, don't assume the team doesn't know it. They do. They see it too. And just talk about it openly and let them know. Man, transparency as a leader will get you so much loyalty. Guys, I messed up. I made a mistake. I was wrong. I don't have all the answers. Hey, if some of you, here's something I told this guy that I'm coaching right now who leads a team. I told him this the other day. I said, listen, take a situation where you know exactly how it should play out, right? You know it exactly how it works. You know the answer. Call in one of your team members, sit them down and go, hey, I'm struggling through this issue. Can I just bounce it off of you and get your thoughts on it? And I'm telling you, that person's going to leave your office and go, wow, they really wanted my input. They wanted my opinion. That's good leadership. You're teaching them. You're modeling good leadership to them. So you don't need to truly not know what's happening in order to do that. Do it on things you know about. You might learn something, but you're really going to empower your team.
As a leader, do you also take the mindset of praise in public, and then that also leads to leverage with that employee or team member in private? Because if you praise that person publicly most of the time when they're doing a good job, and then every once in a while when they have a little bit of a mistake or a misstep and you got to coach them up, and you bring them behind the closed doors the same way, going top down here, is that the right way to be looking at that, or is that just an employee up mindset?
No, I'm glad you brought that up. 100%, 100%. You know, over the years, as a leader in a company, I would be privy to some big announcements that were going to be made, right? And I would know that certain people on my team that I was pouring into, I might call them into my office one-on-one, an hour before the announcement was made and go, hey, I'm going to tell you about something that this announcement's going to be coming down here in about an hour. And I wanted you to know before everybody else, because I didn't want you to hear it with everybody. That's kind of how I'd want to be treated. So I wanted to treat you the same way. Now, listen, dude, this is between me and you. I mean, I'm just telling you, and I watched that loyalty just go through the roof. And what it earned me the right to do was that same person. Now I was able to call him into my office and shut the door and go, hey, dude, you're really screwing this up and you're messing this up. And they would listen because I showed them respect in other areas. And so there should always be someone on your team, or a couple people, depending on the size of your team, that you're pouring into more than the others, that you're giving a little bit more time to, that you've identified them as leaders. You've identified them as people that could have an impact on your business. And so you're giving them a little bit more. And you're doing more of those things with. And the more that you will give them a little bit of insight behind the curtain that you didn't have to do, boy, it will gain you tremendous loyalty with them. And they'll be your champions on the floor then, when things are coming up. Because, man, you need other people to be fighting those battles for you and be the soldiers on the ground, right? You need those soldiers on the ground out there, and that's how you get those.
So what do you say to that leader that says, and they might be more of a boss versus a leader, right? And there's definitely a difference between leader and boss. But what do you say to that maybe boss who's acting like a leader on their best days? Then they say something like, well, I don't really want to I don't want to pour into those people. I don't want to grow those people like that, because what if they leave? Then I've spent all this extra time and effort building them up, and I got no ROI, Bill. Where's my return on investment? Do you know how much I care about cash? What are you doing? What do you say to them?
Boy, well, I know you well enough in watching that unfortunately it happens, but boy, what a terrible, insecure place to be as a leader. They're going to leave anyways. Look, you can either pour into people, right? And they might leave, or you can not pour into them and God forbid they stay. Right. I mean, if you're not training people up and growing them, then you just have these mediocre people that stay. I love the way the NFL looks at it, where they look at a coach's tree, they look at the coaching tree, where this guy coached. Take Nick Saban at Alabama. His best people leave every single year for head coaching jobs, right? Kirby Smart at Georgia, his best people leave. Why? Because they sat under the leadership of a Nick Saban or a Kirby Smart, and they learned so much. They get an opportunity now. So why, as a leader, would you not go, man, isn't that great that we poured into somebody and they learned so much that now they're out doing something great? I hope they stay with me. I'd love to build this with them. Dave, I think Ramsey would have loved me to stay. But never once did he do anything after I left than encourage me and send me notes of encouragement, give me a call, take me to dinner, and encourage me. Never once was he like, boy, you screwed up. I can't believe you left. Never. So,
it's funny, doing good things for people and being a good person just tends to work out in the long run. If you hold people too tightly, and you try to push down on them and you try to constrict, to control, and not trust, that will bounce back on you. I think about, John Felkins, who I'm sure you know at Ramsey, or maybe he came a little bit after you, but he was one of my leaders on the entree team. Yeah, John was one of my leaders on the entree team, and I think about he had a moment. So this is a fun story. So John was one of my leaders, and so what happened? So we were trying to do a Facebook Live during the pandemic and all the crazy stuff that was going on there. And we were trying to do rapid response stuff, and we were doing something quickly and trying to be flexible and nimble and do all the things. So we put him on camera. We had him do a Facebook Live inside of the group, all the things. It did not go smooth, and it did not go super well. And I will always respect John. And we all knew that in the room. That was the thing, is nobody thought that was great, and nobody wanted to do more of at that level. Right. But John, instead of and John, to his credit, was the one on camera. So he was the one that got the brunt of the reputational damage, so to speak, amongst our customers. But John, after the fact, just took us aside and said, hey, I think we all know how that went. Let's just make sure it doesn't happen again. And we were like, roger that. And then that was that was I'll never forget that. And it's hard to say bad things about him around me now, because I have so much loyalty to him still years later, because, it was a praise, and he's been a very good leader about praising in public, and then in private taking people aside and being like, hey, at least that was my experience. So, I do see that both as a leader now, and because, it's funny, when I had the barbecue restaurant, I wanted everybody to stay long-term, and I did want to train them. And I did believe in that model, but I didn't want them to ever leave. And so I did kind of shift my mentality eventually after enough restaurant employees, which is crazy turnover. And I shifted my mentality a little bit to be, hey, you know what? You're with me for this season. I'm going to try to make your world as good as possible, because I know the downstream effect of that is that my business will get what it wants. And it was a big shift for me. I will be honest. I struggled with it for a long time. I wanted to hold on really tight to all the branding and all the people, and I didn't want them to go anywhere else. And, it was a subtle shift for me to being what's best for them first, and then what's best for us as a company second. And I don't know if that's the right thing necessarily all the time, but in general, as a rule of thumb, it tends to work out for me over the last decade. When I flip it around the other way, you can't flip it but for so long, because the minute you start asking for more for the company side of things, you start withdrawing that emotional, relational bank account, right? Do you ever think about it in terms of balances at all, or you just, how do you operate within that?
Some of it is just a gut. That's where I think vision comes into play. I think you've got to know where it's kind of like if I'm going to run a running race, and, it's 6 months down the road, I know the training that I've got on the calendar between now and the 6 months. But then there's certain things that you just feel, right? You feel like, I'm supposed to train today, but I've got this little tweak here and this thing doesn't feel right. I'm going to give it a little bit of rest. So you you adjust, right, along the way. And I think leading the business is the same way. It's like, hey, we're going to lay out the plan. We got to have a plan. We're going to lay out how we think we should operate and how we think we should do it. But then along the way, you talk to somebody and you feel like they're growing or they can take on more responsibility. So the plan might adapt. And I think you've got to have a plan, but it's always got to be, it's got to be a little bit flexible, boy. You don't stick to it no matter what. There's things that happen, and new information creates, new opportunities to change things up a little bit.
Yeah. Bend, but don't break. That's what I'm hearing. It's sometimes you got to bend a little bit just to stay flexible and stay moving. The biggest skyscrapers in the world sway, and swaying might come across as the wrong mentality to have. But I think if you're too rigid on things, and you're too black and white, it's a tough place to be for sure. Well, I've really enjoyed this, but I want to come full circle and land the plane because we definitely talked about it in the opening, and that was your social media stardom. And now, granted, we're going to put all your links in. You guys should definitely go follow Bill on Twitter or TikTok or LinkedIn or Instagram, all the things. He's great. But you had one of the most famous videos in the world where the gun instructor. Let me tee this up here. So that there was a weapons instructor that you guys were at, and he had a misfire on the range. And then you hear this voice come in and say, "Did you mean to do that?" And then the guy said, "Yeah." And so just land the plane for us here on the episode, and then I'll let you get out of here. But explain what happened on that day, and then what's the leadership lesson we should all take away from that?
Yeah, well, I've been going to Vegas every year for 20 years with the same guys, and every year we go, I used to do what we called the Hampton surprise. I would surprise these guys with something we were going to do fun, and so that particular day we went to the Las Vegas gun range, and we were going to shoot everything they had in the gun range. Well, the instructor they paired us with was this guy who immediately told us how much he knew, how smart he was, basically how dumb we were. He literally even mentioned, I think he made reference to killing people and all this stuff, right? So we're just like, oh my gosh. But we had a fun day shooting all these guns and everything. But he was telling us about a 44 Magnum, and I was filming this on my Sprint Trio phone. I was filming this.
You're dating yourself, Bill.
He was talking to us about, it was 2008. And he was talking to us about how to shoot this 44 Magnum. And as he was talking, the gun went off, and it literally, he was holding it about 6 inches from his face, and it went off and it kicked back. And we were just shocked. And my natural response was, "Did you mean to do that?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he turned red, and his legs were locked, and his buddy was looking at him, and there was a hole in the ceiling, and it was so uncomfortable. We were so shocked. But I got back and posted that video, and it sat out on YouTube for about 6 years before someone who had a big account found it, posted it, and it blew up overnight. And it's been on TV shows and everything. But the leadership lesson in that is, as we go in, as we talk to businesses, as we're business owners, you ran a barbecue shop, and you might have met other barbecue guys. And the worst thing for you to do was to try to go in. But sometimes we naturally want to go in and we want to puff our chest out and talk about how great we're doing, because we're trying to get respect, and we're trying to get, acknowledgement for the hard work that we've done. But it's such a better place to be, to always go in and learn. When you talk to another barbecue stand, when you talk to another barbecue owner, just ask them questions about what it'll eventually come around to you. They'll know how you're doing, but don't miss the opportunity to learn. Always be looking to learn, or that gun might backfire and it might knock your teeth out. You got to be careful.
Yeah, that's a good word to end on. I think it was Zig Ziglar. There's two quotes that came to mind when you were going to end there. It was John Maxwell always says, "Don't be the smartest guy in the room. It's a dangerous place to be."
Yes.
And then Zig Ziglar's famous quote of, "You help enough people get what they want, you'll have everything you need." And man, I appreciate you
That's
coming
right.
on and helping us get what we need today from a leadership lesson standpoint. This has been a great episode. We'll make sure to link your website, your social media. You guys definitely got to check Bill out.
Awesome.
What can we do to support you, Bill? Like, as far as like, who are you looking for to serve as a client base? I'm sure you're pretty booked up, but we'd love to pitch your stuff for a second, man. This has been great.
Man, I appreciate it. Look, if you're I love working with small business owners, guys who are just wanting to grow, but they just feel stuck. I love to talk to those guys. And then if you're a leader in a larger company, you're a department leader and you just want to get better at what you do, you want to lead your team better. Those are guys that I want to talk with. I only want to speak from places of experience, and I feel like I've got a lot of experience in those areas and I can help. So yeah, I'd love for folks to reach out.
All right. We'll take care of you. We'll put all the links out. We appreciate you guys listening, and we will see you next week.